Hey guys, my name is Bjorn. I'm from the class of 2015, 1 year ahead of you, and I just wanted to try to synthesize my perspective on second year and how to do it. I know I talk kind of slow. I was recently happy to learn that you can speed up YouTube videos, so I'm planning to put this on YouTube. That's probably where you're watching it, and if you figure out there at the bottom, you can actually speed up YouTube videos, so that's cool. Just a little bit about me as a student. I had a weak science background and a fairly low MCAT score. I got 28 on the MCAT, and I'm proud that through asking for a lot of advice and I think God leading me to a lot of good advice in medical school, I was able to turn my relatively low MCAT score. It flipped that into a very high Step 1 score. I think my score should land within the top 10% of the nation for Step 1. So that's good, and I'd like to encourage you that that's possible to do with being smart and some good strategy. So in this video, I've already made videos for the specific courses that you'll be taking in second year, and this one is more like general principles, what I think you might do this summer to give yourself a head start, or what would be worth your time to do this summer should you judge that you have time to do that. And then I've got some maxims of a second year medical student. Those are just kind of principles, rules to live by. In my opinion, who you can trust and who are the best sources for your courses during second year. And then what I really want you to do is marry your sources for second year right into your boards preparation, so that you've already seen everything. By the time you're preparing for boards, you're not plowing through new material. You're marrying your studying all along to your boards preparation. So let's just talk about the summer. I've got that right here, and this is you'll be hearing me talk about pathoma. If you're not already familiar with pathoma, I highly recommend it. It was recommended to me by the guy in the class ahead of us, who I believe is still #1 in their class. Really brilliant guy, a lot more brilliant than me, but I've been able to benefit from learning from his mistakes. So I would say it is worth your time. I pretty much beg you to make time over the summer to do the first 3 chapters of Pathoma. You get Pathoma by buying it at pathoma.com. I encourage you to buy it. There are pirated copies circulating, and I occasionally do use pirated information as well, but Pathoma is good. I want you to make this man rich. He's really done a good job. His name is Dr. Sitar. So these 3 chapters, if I could summarize why I think it's so beneficial for you to do them, is it's giving you the language of pathology that pathologists seem to be unable to break out of into any simpler terms. So he can take you from simple terms into the language of pathology that's going to be kind of par for the course as soon as you start a real pathology course. I didn't get to these videos until maybe halfway through the year, and I remember talking to my buddies in my class and just being like, man, have you done those? And they're like, yeah, I wish I would have done them sooner. And I was like, yeah, me too. So this is Pathoma table of contents. I would get familiar with those. Honestly, I would do them 3 times and memorize everything about them. I'll be talking later about how exactly to use Pathoma, but right here's just a big plug for doing those first 3 chapters. And yeah, if you're a gunner, you can do more. I just showed the first 7 chapters here. There's more, but that's that. Okay, so maxims of a second year medical student. Don't be afraid to pick a different source. Pick something you like. And that feeds, I can just say from personal experience, I was afraid to pick different sources. I thought, well, notes, like the teacher writes the test and I want to get questions right on the test. Well, in my experience, just pick something you like. If you don't like the notes, pick something that you like. It plays right into the next principle, which is engage. This is my my most if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, is like engage. Like, find a way to engage. Whatever you're doing, if you're not engaged, you should be trying something else. And of course, that's probably true in your love life as well, but I don't really want to get into that. It's better to be solid on less information than sketchy on more. Okay? Let that sink in. I'm not going to repeat it, but I really believe that to be true. Strategize to get paid double or triple by adjusting your order of operations. Now, what I mean by that, and I'll just use an example, pharmacology is probably an easy place to draw an example from. A lot of times when you're learning drugs, you're learning how they interact with a certain system. If you don't already have a really good handle on your physiology of that system, and even the pathophys of that system, it's a waste of your time to be memorizing what drug does what without understanding the implications of that function. Okay? So go back. You're getting paid double. Go back to your physiology, understand the system, draw the system on a piece of paper, and then come back and draw the drugs on top of that in a different color. And what you've just effectively done is gotten paid double, because you are now ready to study pharmacology in a much more meaningful way, and you also just reviewed physiology for boards. So grab your BRS, grab your pathophys syllabus, grab whatever it is you do to review physiologic functions of a system, and make sure that you know those. And that's really just an example, but if you look for chances to get paid double, you can find them by doing things in the right order and not memorizing until you understand what the implications of why you're memorizing something. Number 4, I have build in redundancy for yourself, and I also put that's in a way that your iPad can't do. So basically, to illustrate this, I have a collapsible file folder. It's like made out of plastic. It's got a bunch of slots in it, and I keep random slips of paper from classes in that, one slip for each class. And what's been really cool, I guess I could kind of think of that as my holster. Like, I've made drawings of a system. I'll say, like, my microbiology algorithms showing which bugs are gram-positive and gram-negative, and the different laboratory tests that can be done for those. Those are so good. I've drawn them out so carefully that I want to keep them right by my side where I can see them. Because all the time, if I might be reading in pathology or in neurology, and some microbe comes up, I want to have my page of those microbes at hand so that I can see it right then. And the iPad just doesn't really do that. What I'm talking about is spreading out. If I'm, say, studying pharmacology of a system or studying pathology or something, I've spread out my drawing of that system that I may have made way back in physiology class or something like that. It's there for me to see it again, because really it's seeing things hundreds of times that makes them really stick in your mind and know where to go. So just because I can remember that, staph or strep pneumo is an encapsulated catalase negative bug, that's just not as good as seeing it again on my page where it is and knowing how to approach it. So what I say is that, and you'll hear me talking about in Pathoma, like keeping a list of your drawings. I guess keeping a folder, of your drawings, so you can look at all your drawings at the same time and relate them to each other is really important, and that's what I mean by building in redundancy. Number 5, make it a new topic. Take a new angle on it. And again, I'll kind of use examples. If you could just imagine like a concept map, say it's like a tree, and the tree has a trunk and then a limb and a branch and a twig. You get out to like smaller and smaller little items in your outline, and it gets kind of too complex to really remember. So my suggestion of that is make a new trunk. As often as you can, make a new trunk. And you'll hear me talking about in the microbiology videos of how to go through micro. A lot of times when you're learning these different lab tests, like we can ask the question, is there a catalase enzyme, is there urease enzyme? It's so hard. The way they teach you microbiology, you're made to believe that you should, as you're learning this bug, and you're already like 3 layers deep in your outline, that you're now going to try to remember that it's urease and catalase negative, and that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is make a new trunk out of each of those tests. So urease, and first aid has good mnemonics for this. You should familiarize yourself with those early on so that you will have seen them a lot of times by the time you take boards. So hopefully I made myself clear that making a new trunk out of those urease things, or a new, by trunk I mean like heading to your outline, really pays off, and it allows you to remember things in, I think memories have shapes, you know what I mean? And our outlines have shapes, and it allows you to make more simple shapes out of your outlines so you can remember it. Also, like another example would be stones. In the body, there's kidney stones and there's gallbladder stones. That's 2 examples of stones. And I know I'm going to get my stones all crossed up. Which one was which one happened where. So I make a new trunk out of stones. Like stones is a topic for me. And I have a sheet on which I wrote down all the stones that can happen, and I compared them by whether or not they're visible radiographically or invisible radiographically, and in who they might arise and how to treat them. And I think that's really good, and it helps me keep things straight. So I'll leave it at that. But look for examples to make new trunks in your outlines rather than being way down too deep in an outline with more detail. Okay, splitting or clumping, and I guess I won't say that much about it. It's actually Dr. Chase. She said, I'm a clumper or a lumper when it comes to information, and other people are splitters, and she's not sure which one's better, but you need to be able to do both is the point. And I'll give you a couple examples. Like these are down here. I just talked about shapes of information. There's quite a lot of diseases that all follow a similar syndrome, and I just want you to be prepared for that. Like say volume overloaded versus pressure overloaded diseases of the heart. I don't know, that's probably not the best example. The best example is probably obstructive versus restrictive diseases of the lungs, or nephritic and nephrotic diseases of the kidney. So in these situations, you can basically make a list of disease, one here, one here, one here, one here, and then they all funnel into this syndrome. And then on the other, so in here where they're all funneling, you're learning like your patient presentation, right? And then over here on the other side are like specific. You'd want to divide it back out into its specific lab findings that might help you distinguish between these diseases diagnostically, and that's more of a splitting function, So I just want you to be deliberate about that, like rather than just writing out in endless text paragraphs, this is what happens in this disease. Like funnel things in that are like each other. So, and that's lumping, when you funnel all these obstructive diseases together and say they're all similar in this way. And then splitting is when you're saying, okay, they're different in this way. And if you're really deliberate about organizing your information like that, you'll find that you can know a lot less and get to the, when question writers write questions, they're looking for distinctions between diseases, so you're going to recognize those with your splitting. And they also test based on, do you understand that this process is shared by these other diseases. So I think it's a good way to think. Identify what lab or lectures have to offer you and take what you can away from it. I guess I won't belabor that too much, but if you not every lecture that you're going to be even obligated to sit through, or lab that you're obligated to go to, is really going to be 100% valuable to you, but it might be 5% valuable to you. Grab that 5% and go on and find something else to do. But take the 5%. You had to be there. You might as well learn something. Do what will benefit you the most, even if it means sacrificing a grade. So for me this year, that meant I don't want to make myself a slave to trying to get honors. I'm gonna let honors slip away. And specifically, I decided right from the get-go I wasn't gonna try to honor farm. And honestly, the way I strategized about farm, I might have been able to honor farm, but I said I'm not gonna try to honor pathophys. I'm not gonna try to honor, for me, pathology, because I just didn't think the course represented what was on boards well enough for me to try to make it worth my time to honor, you know what I mean? But I think other people did think that it did and probably benefit from it, but that was just my opinion. So I think you understand that principle. And then my last principle is beware of the iPad. And the biggest reason for that is, and Dr. Werner will tell you, there's a reason why pathophys is printed on one side. And first when I saw it, I was like, man, what a waste of paper. You know, back in PDX days, what a waste of paper. They only print on one side of this, all this paper. Man, but I realize now, like, that's totally by design. And when if you watch my video about pathophysiology, I actually forgot to kind of explain this study method in that video, but I'll write it in the caption below the video. But basically, in pathophys, I ended up making a lot of drawings, some concept maps, and filling out Dr. Werner's objectives, which you'll learn is your responsibility to do. You have to do it anyway, so you might as well benefit from doing that by making yourself good drawings. And then all of a sudden, at the end, I would find that the best thing for me to do to study was to lay out like an entire chapter. I might have like 40 pages on the floor all in front of me while I'm studying. I did it in the library sometimes when people would give me a funny look. And then I'm just like, I'm walking down the row of my pages, either doing flashcards that I made, and then like go and find the spot in the notes that confirms my answer to the question, or I'm studying my diagram or answering Dr. Werner's objectives and then walking to that place in the notes. So that confirms that, and I found that a really good way to study a lot of things. Being able, it's like, I don't know, it's, my parents are bird watchers, and when you get really high power binoculars, they limit your field of vision. Like, you can get, it's like a telescope, you know. You can see so much detail about one little thing, and that's what an iPad is, like a telescope or a really high power binoculars. Like, it's a good way to look at one thing, you know, in detail, but you can't understand the scope of things and look at multiple pages at the same time and compare them to each other. So I do think that's important. I think a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot by trying to do everything on the iPad. We talked about that. Okay, who to trust throughout the year based on your different courses, and I'd recommend a few things you might buy. Pharmacology, Dr. Werner's your best friend. His drug list and his side effects list is good. Better than first aid. I mean, it's a pain in the butt subject to try to wrap your mind around, but Dr. Werner has a better idea of what's going to be on step one than first aid does. First aid is a student-made resource, and it's got way too much pharmacology in there that, you know, isn't going to be tested. So I'd say trust Dr. Werner, and do what you can. In my pharmacology video, I explain how to not get buried by pharmacology. This is a good book. I include the ISBN number. It's got great questions in it. It's an integral part of my strategy for pharm. So I would go ahead and grab that one. And then moving on to microbiology, I said yourself and first aid. So basically by yourself, I mean you need to make really good maps of the diagnostic processes that go on. You know, okay, if I'm talking about gram-positive cocci, I've got coagulase positive and coagulase negative, and staph and strep. Those are split by that test, and then down farther. I don't want to explain too much without having a picture, but the point is, you need to make good map drawings of your algorithms and know those, and then studying first aid. First First aid is valuable for microbiology in step 1 because it includes a proper scope of what you need to know, and not too much. I'd say high yield microbiology has too much, in my opinion. Dr. Watts has an amazing memory. She'll be lecturing to you and you'll be astounded by how much she knows about these things. But first aid does a better job of helping you narrow down what you need to know, and then you need to be synthesizing in your own way. High Yield Microbiology, I went ahead and bought it, and I think it's a good book because it has pretty good questions, especially relating to the systems. Once you get into the second half of microbiology, and you're going to have a test about like urinary tract microbiology and the bugs that infect it. Like there's just classic questions in microbiology, and there's like three or five questions that you're pretty much just gonna get, and this will probably ask them to you ahead of time, and I recommend doing that. Pathology, anyway, I've made a video about all these classes, so I'm not gonna go into it too much, but what you want is Pathoma. Buy it early. Buy it, Pathoma.com, and start using it. I recommend during the summer, but I do respect those who try to protect their time for family and other things during the summer. So that's up to you, but those first 3 chapters are really worth doing so that you can speak the language. Pathophysiology, you need some paper to draw on, and you don't need to buy anything outside of the video, outside of the syllabus. And biochem, DIT is really good. Watch my biochem video. There's parts of biochem, I should also put Kaplan for tiny stuff. That's how I remember it, as in like DNA, RNA, transcription, translation. Okay, I'm not gonna bother spelling all this right, but that stuff was pretty good in Kaplan, whereas DIT was really good for your metabolic pathways. And for genetics, DIT was really good. DIT is basically taking you through first aid, and we'll talk about how to use each of these resources down below. Preventive medicine, Dr. Chelam anybody who teaches like epidemiology that I've ever heard, pretty much, has taught it. It seems like they've taught it for too long, and they're so fluent in the language that it's just like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't speak that language, and I need you to back it up to layperson's terms. Like Dr. Lou in the freshman year always talking about like, oh yeah, this is per protocol, and this other one is la da da da. Like, what is per protocol? Like, where are these definitions, and what are you talking about? So, but Dr. Chelam's not as bad, honestly. She does a pretty good job, and she also does a good job of just helping you understand the scope of what you need to know. DIT is probably, you think of it as a review source, but really DIT comes in at a nice introductory level for PrevMed, probably more introductory than these other sources, like what Chelam would give you. So I recommend getting on that DIT, and I'll show you how I kind of married DIT to regular school throughout the year. Neurology, trust Dr. Cole, trust Dr. Cole, trust Dr. Cole. I really think that's your best bet. Dr. Cole's pretty much the only neurology source I studied. In psychiatry, Dr. Bolton does a good job of helping you understand the scope, much like Chelam did. First aid is okay. I did first aid like the last couple days. I didn't study very much for psychiatry for step 1, but I did run through first aid like in the few days before the test, and I think that was beneficial. And then these books by Barbara Fadum, BRS and High Yield, are both by her, and they have good questions in them. I think one of them has the questions at the end of the chapter. That's probably the better one, and the other one, the questions are like intermixed in the chapter. Okay, so for your boards preparation, and you'll see a lot of these sources that I'm saying use throughout the year are the same sources that you're going to be using for boards, and that's how I designed my year. Like, I didn't want to be going through new stuff at the end. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use first aid. Okay, first aid, divides, this is the table of contents of first aid. It divides up into general principles and high yield organ systems. I actually split this book and had it rebound into two books, and by the end I realized I used this one a ton. Like, not really to read. I don't like first aid. I don't like just trying to remember stuff. First aid doesn't do a lot of explaining. It's just like remember. So I would more use it to reinforce and to make sure I'd seen it and to help me understand the scope of things than to really learn. I didn't find it engaging. Remember, my number one rule is engage. So since I didn't find first aid engaging, you'd see me more doing UWorld questions. I haven't talked about UWorld enough. It should definitely be on this list because it's a big deal. So by the end, I'll tell you, like, I really have very little experience with the second half of first aid. I found that our coursework and pathoma, so many of these are just our pathology, and they'll probably go through the embryology in here. But if you've done DIT for embryology, it will have taken you to all these same places to talk about the renal embryology and the reproductive embryology and whatever. So really, I pretty much poo-pooed, 300 pages of first aid, and ended up using this half a lot more. And that's just because I think there were tons of answers on step 1 that were in there, but I feel like I was finding them in other places. So that's my talk about first aid. I couldn't read first aid. Just sit down and read never worked for me, and so that's why I use DIT. So I'll talk a minute about DIT, since DIT basically takes you through pathoma, and somebody gave me a copy of 2012 DIT, and I've shown this in other videos, but you can get the lecture list here. It's just a table, and here's all your topics. This is the embryology lecture number 1. Here's neuro lecture number 1. I would print this if I was you, and go through and mark each lecture, each topic with a different color, so you could quickly find, okay, I know I'm looking for a pharmacology lecture, I know my pharmacology lectures are blue, and you could quickly skim through this. It's only 4 pages, and know where to find a pretty good resource that definitely helps you understand the scope of what you want to know. So I'd do that from the beginning, honestly. Pretty soon you're going to start trusting this and using it along with your classes. How to use pathoma. I talked about that in detail in my video about the pathology course. If I could just say a couple bullet points here is do pathoma first. I would do it twice before doing anything else. Keep a booklet or a file of some sort of your drawings that he makes in the videos, because you're going to want to do the videos. Yeah, when I say do pathoma, I mean do the videos. And keep a booklet of the drawings so that you can use them and relate them to other sources, like the notes that you might eventually use. And the advantage of doing pathoma twice before doing anything else is that you'll know what is in pathoma and what isn't, so when you finally do make a lightning trip through Chaos stuff, if you want to, through Chaos audio, you're not going to underline a ton or even hardly any at all on the topics that pathoma has already covered. You'll just mark in a special color okay, pathoma didn't cover this. You basically say it's an orange pin, and that orange pin means pathoma didn't cover this, and Dr. Chaos seems to think it's important. So I'm going to mark that and make sure I see it real quick before the test, and that'll help you collect a few extra points. So that's kind of how pathoma goes. Do it early. Keep a notebook of drawings, and do it lots of times. I did pathoma. I got through most of pathoma playing the videos at double speed in the weekend before the pathology mock board, and then I got through it again before step 1. And so all in all, I probably did pathoma 5 times throughout the year, and I think that was really good. So I talked about DIT. How to use Kaplan. Well, you use Kaplan in the same way you use DIT. They're just nice review videos. But specifically, the reason I included Kaplan is because I found him really helpful in two areas. The most was anatomy. They have an awesome in this version of, I think it's the 2012 DIT version that I use. The anatomy teacher is like, he has a New York accent. He's really fun to listen to. He breaks it down. He like designs the human body for you, and just makes it so interesting. And I heard, like, my roommate, for example, was telling me after he took his step 1 test, like, man, I had this question about like the lung and a penetration from outside and which lobe of the lung did it hit. Like, how are you supposed to know that kind of thing? Is it the 4th intercostal space or the 5th? And I was like, man, I didn't have that question, but I saw it, and like it was in the Kaplan 2000. Oh, I need to tell you what year of Kaplan I have. I'm not sure. Maybe it's 2010. Anyway, here's this guy.
Talking about the autonomic nervous system.
He's pretty good. And everything's always done with a picture right before your eyes, so you don't have to be trying to imagine something that's not there. It's there for you.
Flexed position. That's
good stuff. I think I probably got 5 questions right on step 1 from that. I was just going to do Dr. Nava's PowerPoints again, and I planned on doing those, but by the time I started doing the Kaplan anatomy, I just thought it was so good, I just stuck with that. Never really did Nava stuff. So, and the other thing that Kaplan is good for is like learning about like DNA to RNA to protein function, all the enzymes that involve, all those little like cell cycle, all those questions on tiny little stuff that you biology majors know about. Kaplan was good for that, and I did Kaplan for that kind of stuff because I knew I was weak on it, and I think Kaplan kind of straightened me out. Like, there's 3 different polymerases, 3 different DNA polymerases and 3 different RNA polymerases, and the ones that prokaryotes have are different than the ones eukaryotes have, and they actually ask that kind of stuff on step 1, so it's kind of a shame of something to waste your brain knowing, in my opinion, but it's there. UWorld, different people, I guess it depends on how fast you are and how much time you have. Different people use UWorld in different ways. What I did is by the time we got to test week, I was so bored of doing repetitions on the same lectures over and over again that I just hated it. So I would take test weeks. I wouldn't study ever extra stuff during test week. Even if I was doing kind of bad, a lot of times I wouldn't study just because of the sheer boredom. If I realized I wasn't doing good in psych or whatever, I'd just be like, oh well. And I would do UWorld questions. I do UWorld questions on the psych topics. And usually, doing UWorld the day before the next testing day, I would get like, probably 2 questions verbatim. It's pretty uncanny how well UWorld dials that kind of thing in. And I felt like it kept me in the mindset of answering questions. So I think that's a good time to get through as much UWorld as you can. At that pace, only doing UWorld during testing weeks, and the fact that it's hard to stay focused during a testing week because you want to have a little bit of fun. I only got through about half of UWorld before school ended, and then I finished the last half of UWorld, and then I got through most of it again. And I'll kind of explain. Well, no, I guess now's the time to explain that. I think a good place to be in the week before boards is have all your drawings. I went home, and I had all my drawings that I made, divided up per organ system. Here's my renal drawings, here's my lung drawings, here's my everything, splayed out on the floor like over 2 rooms in my house. And then I would just be doing UWorld questions like hardcore. Like one day I did 400, and like I would just, if you could get through UWorld in that way in the week, and I think it might take a week because it's some heavy stuff, in the week before boards, you would be doing really well. You would have seen a lot of questions that you're gonna see on boards, and be in the mindset to answer questions. And like, it's just so fast having everything laid out on the floor like that, all my drawings and all the things that I knew were my good sources, I could get to them like in 2 seconds and walk over there and see that again to help reinforce my answer. So I felt like that was a good way to study for boards. So just in summary, first aid, I used the first half of it mostly, and I never just sat down and read it. I used it more as like a refer to source. And first aid also helps you answer the question, because you need to answer this question many times every day. Is this going to be on boards? All the high yield stuff on boards is in first aid. So it's a good place to get an answer to the likelihood of whether or not this is going to be on boards. Okay? And then if it's not, you might not want to be including it in your grand scheme of things. I talked about how to use these others, and yeah. Okay, and then I guess I'll just leave this here. This looks a lot like what's above, but it included the classes that, and I forgot to include embryology actually. It included first year classes. Just what I would say you could trust for your board studying. So anatomy, I said go Kaplan, go Kaplan, go Kaplan. Embryology is another one. It's like immunology and cell biology here, in that it's piecemeal. Okay, what I mean by that is I didn't really ever sit down and study embryology for boards, but it comes in pieces as you're studying these other sources. And especially if you do DIT adds so much to making your board study methodical and proper depth in each area. And so yeah, I would say piecemeal and DIT. It kind of all comes in pieces. But DIT was good. Even you might not feel like, okay, I'm studying embryology, because maybe what you're really doing is introducing yourself to the renal system and you're studying renal, but you're also going to include the embryology of that, and I felt like that was good. Physiology, identify your weak areas. By the time you take in pathophys, you're really good at a lot of areas of physiology, but if you have some weak areas, for me it was like endocrine and especially the gestational axis, like FSH, LH, all that stuff. I knew I needed to review that, and I knew I needed to review renal, and so I did go back to BRS Physio to cover my weak areas. Cellular biology, yeah, Kaplan and Pathoma. By the time you do this stuff I was talking about before with Kaplan and transcription, translation, and cell cycle and all that stuff, and you do Pathoma, you don't need to study cellular pathology as a cellular biology as a topic. It's just going to fall into place for you. Same with immunology, man. Pathoma can really make a lot of immunology fall into place. And then DIT, married to first aid, of course, helps with that too. But my Pathoma drawings that would show me like how the immune system worked and which cytokines activate what. Like this guy, and that's why I'm telling you to do the first 3 chapters. Like he actually makes sense out of the cytokines, and where I feel like they're my friends instead of my enemies, you know. And all that stuff kind of falls into place. Pharmacology, remember I say trust Dr. Werner, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't study pharmacology very much. I didn't honor the class, I did high pass it, but I narrowed pharmacology down to often about 40-ish flashcards with single word answers or a picture answer that I make in Anki, and you want to learn Dr. Werner's side effects and that kind of thing, but when it comes down to it, what's going to be the highest yield on board, I feel like, is the kinetics, the dynamics, and the dosage math, and DIT is really good for that. And I just since I had made those flashcards, like roughly 40 per lecture throughout the year, I just grabbed my old drawings of each system, and you'll hear me talk about that in the pharmacology video. But my drawings and flashcards, based off of Dr. Werner's suggestions of the scope for pharmacology, were my best source. And actually, when I was doing UWorld, I didn't do any UWorld farm. I was just like, it's so, I feel like, maybe it's really good, I don't know, but it's like, how could you, there's topics to me that are obviously going to be high yield, like the kinetics and the dynamics and the dosage math, and everything else, like, I would just trust Dr. Werner and my flashcards on it. That's my opinion on that. You can read that. I've talked about all this other stuff elsewhere, so I'm not gonna go too long. Same with this. This speaks to the same issue that this speaks to. So for physiology and pathophysiology, when you're studying for boards, if you're weak in an area, I said go back and read BRS Physio. Go back and read Pathophys too. On the mock board, I haven't told Dr. Werner this. I feel like maybe I should to kind of butter his bread, but sometimes we wonder if his bread is already a little too buttered. But on the mock board, the comprehensive one at the end of the year, I had 2 like significantly weak areas, and they were definitely the 2 areas that I had sloughed off in Pathophys. So I redid those in Pathophys before step 1, and I got those up. So I think that's I think it definitely correlates. You know, Dr. Werner helps you understand how things work, and it's good. Yeah, for biochem, like I said, Kaplan for the transcription, translation, cell cycle type stuff, DIT for genetics, and DIT for metabolic pathways. And there's more detail on that in my biochem video. PrevMed, DIT is really good. And yeah, she's pretty. I like the teacher on there. She has a lot of energy, and she kept my attention. So I recommend that stuff, Medicine Society. It's good introductory level. It's more introductory level than the course itself. And neurology, like I've said before in my other videos, I did Dr. Cole all the way. I did his review course. He gives it at the end of his course. He gives like a 4-hour review lecture, and he gives a handout with it. I probably did that a total of 5 or 6 times, 3 times before the mock board and 2 more times before boards, and that was good. It goes back to my principle about better to be solid on less information than sketchy on more. And Dr. Cole gives you an amount you can be solid on, and he's really your friend for this stuff. And on that note, I should have mentioned this when I was talking about DIT. I really, like I said, I only did the first half of first aid. I also pretty much only did the first half of DIT. Now I did it multiple times. I did the first half of DIT, and it wasn't strictly the first half. The reason is that the bulk of the second half is neurology and cardiovascular stuff. The cardiovascular system and neurology are all in the second half of DIT, of the version that I have, that 2012 version. And here I've indicated you can trust Dr. Cole for neurology. Well, what's also true and saves you a huge amount of time, I realized from my diagnostic tests, like the predictive test for step 1, I was pretty good at the cardiovascular system just because of what Dr. Werner had taught me. So if you trust Dr. Cole for neurology and you trust Dr. Werner for the cardiovascular system, you need to augment Dr. Werner with pathoma to consider the pathology. But as far as how the system works, by the time you've done autonomic farm and Dr. Werner's Pathophys course, you're good at it. So like, save yourself a ton of time and do everything else in DIT 2 or 3 times rather than, belaboring DIT on stuff you're already pretty good at, thanks to Dr. Cole and Dr. Werner. And psychiatry, DIT was good at the last minute. Timeline sketches, and what that goes back to my redundancy principle, and also it also plays into the principle of make a new topic. Probably more so even make a new topic. So in psychiatry, there's a lot of timelines. There's like, how many weeks do they have to feel this way before it's classified as major depression? And how many weeks is grief, pathologic, and how many weeks is it still normal? And how many weeks, how many months until you get to call it postpartum depression, rather than just postpartum blues and all this stuff. So that's a good time to like make a new tree trunk. All these timelines in psychiatry. So I reviewed that, and that's pretty high yield actually. I think I did have a question on boards, and definitely questions in UWorld relating to that. And then, like I said, Barbara Fadum, those BRS and high yield behavioral science. Both of these, by the way, are behavioral science, because there's psychiatry books, and they come with different names, but these are the BRS and high yield behavioral science that have questions. And the reason I said PDF okay is because you're just trying to do the questions, so you don't need a paper copy. That principle about beware of the iPad doesn't really apply here, because you can just open up two files and have your questions be scrolled to your questions in one file and scrolled to your answers in another file. That's fine, it works well. So that's kind of my thought. I'm actually losing my voice a little bit, which tells me I've said too much. I'm sorry if I made this too long and boring. It probably makes it less useful, but I hope that it benefits somebody. And let me know. Email me, bjornharble@llu.edu, if I can help you strategize. That's something I enjoy doing. God bless, and stay strong, stay rooted in something that you know and love, and pray a lot. Second year is quite a gauntlet, but you can do it.